People keep asking what I said when the keypad on my own bedroom door flashed red. They expect shouting, broken furniture, maybe a fist through the wall. I did none of that. I stood in the hallway with my hospital bracelet still around my wrist and listened to my son-in-law laugh behind the door. By breakfast the next morning, he had lost the house, his position, and the lie holding his marriage together. Welcome back to Raw Family Reckoning. Get comfortable because everyone in this story had several chances to choose decency. One person kept choosing possession instead. My name is Grant Mercer. I am 64 years old, a retired commercial builder, and until 12 days ago I believed the most dangerous thing inside my home was the loose stair rail I had been meaning to repair. I was wrong. The most dangerous thing in my home wore polished shoes, called me dad when other people were listening, and had spent 2 years studying everything I owned. His name was Trevor Shaw. He was 35, married to my only daughter Lila, and carried himself like a man who believed confidence could replace character if the suit was expensive enough. Lila was 32, practical, warm, and stubborn in the exact way her mother had been. My wife Evelyn died 4 years earlier, after a fast, cruel illness that left half the house feeling permanently quiet. Lila was the person who kept me eating real dinners afterward. She checked the smoke detectors, remembered my appointments, and never once treated my grief like an inconvenience. Trevor came into her life 1 year later. At first I liked him. He worked in acquisitions for Mercer Development, the company I had built from a borrowed pickup truck and 3 construction contracts. I had not hired him because he married Lila, but I would be lying if I said the marriage did not open the interview room faster than it opened for other people. 6 months before everything happened, a pipe burst in their condominium near downtown Raleigh. The insurance company estimated 10 weeks of repairs. I offered them the guest wing of my house in Oak Park. The house had 5 bedrooms, more space than one widower needed, and I thought having Lila nearby might make the place feel alive again. I noticed small things. My mail was sometimes already opened. A property tax statement disappeared and returned 2 days later, folded differently. Trevor asked whether the house had ever been refinanced. He asked how the Mercer Family Trust worked, then laughed and said he was only curious because acquisitions had made him obsessed with legal structures. I answered less than he wanted. The house had been placed in a revocable trust after Evelyn died. I remained the trustee. Lila would inherit it one day, but not while I was breathing, and certainly not because a man with a bright tie had developed an interest in interest rates. Trevor smiled whenever I told him boundaries. He never liked them, but he smiled. Then my heart began skipping beats. Not dramatically. No movie collapse, no clutching my chest in a restaurant. Just dizziness, shortness of breath, and a rhythm that made my cardiologist stop smiling. Dr. Miriam Cole scheduled an ablation procedure at Wake County Medical Center and told me to expect 3 nights in the hospital, possibly 4. Lila insisted on staying with me the first night. Trevor volunteered to manage the house. He said he would prepare the downstairs bedroom for my recovery stock, the refrigerator, and install safety rails in the bathroom. He sounded so thoughtful that one of the nurses told me I was lucky to have a son-in-law like him. I remember looking at Trevor and watching him enjoy that sentence. The procedure went well. I was sore, tired, and irritated by the hospital gown, but fully alert. On the second afternoon, Trevor visited alone. He brought coffee. I was not allowed to drink and asked whether I had considered giving Lila temporary power of attorney in case the doctors found complications. His tone was gentle. His timing was not. I told him my attorney already held the necessary medical directive, and that Lila was listed only for health decisions. Trevor nodded. Then he asked whether medical debt could threaten the house. I said no. He asked whether the trust could borrow against the property. I said that was an unusually specific question for a man bringing flowers. He laughed, but his eyes did not. Before leaving, he picked up my phone from the bedside tray and said he was plugging it in. He stood with his back to me for less than a minute. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Later, that minute became important enough to replay in my mind 100 times. On the third morning, Dr. Cole said I could go home a day early. My numbers were stable and I had passed every cognitive and mobility check. Lila had gone to a pharmacy across town to collect new medication. I could have waited for her, but my neighbor and oldest friend Samuel Price was already visiting. He offered to drive me home. I did not call Trevor. That was not strategy. I wanted my own bed, my own shower, and 30 quiet minutes before anyone began arranging pillows around me like I was made of glass. Samuel helped me into his truck, complained about hospital parking, and drove through a pale Thursday afternoon while I watched Raleigh slide past the window. The first thing I noticed when we reached my house was Trevor's parents' car in the driveway. A black Lincoln belonging to Howard and Denise Shaw, two people who never visited without announcing themselves 3 days early. The second thing I noticed was a contractor's van parked near the side gate. White paint, no company logo, engine still warm. Samuel asked whether I wanted him to come inside. I told him yes, but not because I was afraid. I was still under lifting restrictions, and my overnight bag felt heavier than it had any right to feel. That is what I told myself. The truth is that something in my chest had gone colder than any hospital room. The front door was unlocked. Music drifted from the dining room. I heard glasses touching a woman's laughter, and Trevor talking in the smooth, relaxed voice he used when he believed the room belonged to him. There was no smell of soup, no folded blanket on the couch, none of the recovery preparations he had promised. Instead, boxes lined the hallway. My boxes. They were labeled study, winter, clothes, Evelyn, and storage. The portrait of my wife that had hung outside our bedroom for 28 years leaned face down against the wall. Her cedar jewelry chest sat on top of a plastic bin, as if it had been pulled from a yard sale. I did not call Trevor's name. I walked toward the bedroom. Samuel followed 2 steps behind me and stopped when I stopped. Mounted where my brass doorknob had been was a black electronic keypad. Fresh screws, fresh paint scratches. A tiny green light blinked once, then waited. The hallway smelled of fresh paint and someone else's confidence. I entered the code I used for the alarm system. Red light. I tried my birthday. Red light. Then, from inside my bedroom, I heard Howard Shaw say, "The safe has to be behind that panel." Trevor answered, "Give me another hour. He won't be back until tomorrow afternoon." The voices were calm, almost cheerful. There are moments when anger arrives like fire. This was not one of them. Fire moves too quickly. What came over me was colder, slower, and far more useful. I looked down at the hospital bracelet around my wrist, then at my wife's portrait on the floor. Samuel whispered one word beside me. "Grant." I raised one finger not to silence him harshly, but because I needed the next 10 seconds untouched. I took out my phone and photographed the lock, the boxes, the contractor's van through the window, and the scuff marks around the door. Then I opened the security application. Trevor apparently did not know still recorded audio in the hallway. The camera had captured everything. Trevor instructing the contractor to remove my lock. Denise carrying Evelyn's clothes into the hall. Howard asking whether the original deed would be in the safe. Trevor saying clearly, "Once the equity line clears, Grant can complain from assisted living if he wants. Lila will calm down when the debt is gone." Samuel heard it over my shoulder. His face changed before mine did. He had known Evelyn since college. He had helped me build the back deck. For a second I thought he might kick the bedroom door open himself. I touched his arm and shook my head. Slow is stronger, when the truth is already recording. I called my attorney, Naomi Brooks. She answered on the second ring. I told her where I was, what I had heard, and what the camera showed. Her first question was whether I felt physically safe. Her second was whether I had signed any property documents in the hospital. I said no. She told me not to touch the door. Then I called the non-emergency police line and reported unauthorized alteration of my property, suspected document theft, and possible forgery. I did not mention family drama. Family drama makes people think emotions. I gave facts, dates, ownership records, and the exact sentence about an equity line. Facts move faster than outrage when you know which ones matter. Only after those calls did I walk into the dining room. Trevor sat at the head of my table. Howard was to his right, Denise to his left. A bottle of champagne stood open beside 3 folders and a silver pen. They looked less like visitors than people celebrating the closing of a deal. Trevor stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "Grant," he said. "Not Dad. Not this time. You weren't supposed to be discharged until tomorrow." I looked at him, then at the champagne, then at the folder with my address printed across the top. "That seems to be the sentence causing you the most trouble," I said. Denise reached for the papers. Samuel stepped into the doorway behind me and her hand stopped. Howard tried a smile that had probably worked during 40 years of sales meetings. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said. Men like Howard love that word. It turns plans into accidents and theft into poor communication. "Open my bedroom," I said. Trevor swallowed. "We changed the room for your recovery. Lila thought the upstairs suite would give you more privacy. I looked at the staircase, then at the cardiac discharge instructions still folded in my coat pocket. You moved a heart patient upstairs for his safety. Try again. Trevor's face hardened for half a second. There he was, the man beneath the Sunday phone calls. You agreed to this, he said. At the hospital? You sent Lila a message saying we should take the primary suite and begin organizing the trust papers before medical bills became a problem. I asked him to show me. He opened his phone and displayed a screenshot of a message sent from my number at 318 the previous afternoon. The words sounded almost like me if I had suffered a head injury and developed a sudden affection for legal phrases Trevor used at work. For one painful moment, the misunderstanding became clear. Lila had not agreed to steal my room. She had received a message from my phone while I was medicated, then been told Trevor was helping protect the house. She had gone to the pharmacy believing the lock was temporary, meant to keep contractors away from medical equipment. Trevor had used the minute beside my hospital bed to unlock my phone with the code he had watched me enter for years. He had sent the message, deleted it from my screen, and built an entire permission structure around one stolen minute. That was his method. Not force. Manufactured consent. Open the door, I repeated. Trevor lifted his chin. The lock is already installed. We can discuss living arrangements after you rest. Howard added, you should be careful, Grant. Stress is dangerous in your condition. It was almost impressive. They had put a lock on my bedroom, then tried to use my heartbeat as their second lock. I sat down at the opposite end of the table. All right, I said. Let's discuss the papers. Trevor glanced at Howard. Relief moved between them, quick and ugly. He believed he had regained control because I had chosen a chair instead of a weapon. That mistake cost him more than the lock ever would. The top folder contained an application for a home equity line of credit against my house. The borrower section listed the Mercer Family Trust. The authorized trustee signature at the bottom looked like mine from 10 years ago, before arthritis changed the angle of my G. Beneath it sat a temporary occupancy agreement assigning the primary suite to Lila and Trevor. The second folder was worse. It contained a physician capacity statement with Dr. Cole's name typed beneath a blank signature line suggesting I might require supervised living. The third contained a draft resignation from Mercer Development transferring my remaining voting authority to an interim committee chaired by Trevor. 3 documents. 1 plan. House Body Company. I kept my face still. How much do you need? I asked. Trevor said nothing. Howard answered before him. This is not about need. It is about protecting family assets. I turned to Trevor. How much? His jaw moved. 800,000, he said quietly. His eyes moved toward Trevor, waiting for permission. There it was. Not concern. Debt. Trevor had formed a private investment company 18 months earlier and used 3 Mercer development vendors to fund speculative land purchases outside Durham. The market turned. Permits stalled. Interest accumulated. He needed my house as collateral before the lenders discovered the company had no remaining cash. What Trevor did not know was that I had discovered the vendor payments 6 weeks earlier. My controller flagged duplicate invoices. I had quietly hired a forensic accountant and copied every transfer into a secured file. I had not confronted Trevor because I wanted facts, not denials. The evidence was not in my bedroom safe. It had never been there. The safe held Evelyn's letters, her wedding ring, and the original recipe card for the peach pie Lila loved. The financial evidence was already with Naomi and an outside auditor. Trevor had locked my bedroom to search for documents that could not save him, and endangered the only things inside that money could never replace. You should have asked me for help, I said. Trevor laughed once without humor. You would have said no. To fraud, yes. To me, he snapped. You never trusted me. You kept Lila tied to this house, tied to your company, tied to your memory of her mother. I was trying to build something of my own. The doorbell rang. 2 officers stood outside with Naomi Brooks behind them and a locksmith beside her. Naomi carried a leather folder and the calm expression of a woman who bills by the hour but would have come for free if Evelyn's jewelry had been touched. Her arrival felt less like rescue than a closing argument. Trevor stared at them. Howard stood. Denise began speaking before anyone asked her a question. Guilty people often rush to provide context because silence leaves too much room for facts. The officers reviewed my identification, the trust certificate. Naomi brought the camera footage and the documents on the table. Their confidence began leaking out of the room. One officer asked Trevor whether he had authorization to replace the lock. Trevor pointed to the screenshot. Naomi asked him to send the original message thread. He could not. Then she asked whether he had permission to access my phone. He said I had given him the code. I said I had not. The room changed after that. I did not have them arrested that afternoon. Not because I forgave them, because Naomi advised patience. Forgery cases become stronger when digital records, lender communications, and financial transfers are preserved before the suspect knows exactly what investigators have. Consequences should not be loud if loudness gives the guilty time to hide. The officers supervised while the locksmith drilled out the keypad. When the door opened, I smelled fresh sawdust and Evelyn's cedar chest. Mattress drawers had been pulled out. Closet panels leaned against the wall. My wife's letters were scattered across the bed, their envelopes bent under Howard's careless hands. Wood splinters fell across the carpet Evelyn had chosen. That was the only moment I nearly lost control. I picked up one letter, the last one Evelyn wrote from hospice, and saw a muddy fingerprint across her name. Samuel moved closer, ready. Naomi said my name softly. I folded the letter, placed it against my chest, and let the anger become evidence. "Leave my house," I said. Trevor looked toward the front door, then back at me. "Lila lives here. Lila is welcome. You are not." Denise protested that married couples could not be separated by a homeowner's mood. Naomi opened her folder and placed the occupancy license on the table. His face tightened as if ownership were a personal insult. When Lila and Trevor moved in, I had insisted on a written guest agreement because my insurance agent recommended it. Trevor had mocked the document as unnecessary. He apparently never read the termination clause. Any unauthorized structural alteration, attempted encumbrance, or fraudulent use of trust property ended his permission to occupy immediately. Naomi pointed to his signature. "You agreed that your license could be revoked without notice under these conditions," she said. Trevor read the paragraph twice. He had signed it 5 months earlier, while joking that old men loved paperwork. Old men do love paperwork. Paper remembers when charming people suddenly forget. Howard and Denise left first. Their celebration bottle remained open on my table. Trevor packed one suitcase under police supervision. He kept checking the driveway for Lila, perhaps hoping she would arrive and turn the house back into a stage where he could perform hurt. She arrived as he carried the suitcase down the stairs. The look on her face stopped everyone. She saw the officers, Naomi, the broken keypad, her mother's letters spread across my bed, and the champagne in the dining room. Then she looked at Trevor. "You said the contractor was installing medical rails," she whispered. He stepped toward her. She stepped back. Trevor began explaining quickly. He said the debt was temporary. He said he had forged nothing, only prepared documents. He said the message from my phone reflected what I would have wanted if I had understood the danger. Every sentence asked Lila to doubt the evidence and trust his intention. She listened until he said, "I did this for us." Then she slapped the home equity folder against his chest. "You did it in my name," she said. I had not seen that page yet. Halfway through the application, Lila was listed as guarantor for Trevor's investment company. Her signature was there too. It was not hers. That was the central secret he had hidden from everyone. The house was not merely collateral. Lila was the shield. If the loan failed, the bank would pursue her assets and credit before his parents ever lost a dollar. Howard had helped structure it that way. Denise had witnessed the false signatures. Lila's misunderstanding died in that hallway. She had believed her husband was overstepping to protect her father. In reality, he was using her father's illness to trap both generations in the same debt. She removed her wedding ring slowly, not theatrically, and placed it on top of his suitcase. Nothing he said could rebuild it. "Go," she said. Trevor looked at me as though I had taken something from him. I had not. Truth had taken it. He walked out under the eyes of 2 officers, his wife, his employer, and the man whose bedroom he had treated like a vault waiting to be conquered. That night, Lila slept in the guest room and I slept nowhere. My cardiologist had ordered rest, but my house felt violated. Samuel stayed until midnight. He helped me return Evelyn's letters to their box, rehung her portrait, and carried the damaged cedar chest to my study. Every room seemed to remember what had happened. At 1 in the morning, after Lila finally stopped crying, I sat at my desk and began making calls. I was not furious anymore. Fury is exhausting and my heart had already done enough work for 1 week. I was decided. There is a difference between punishment and removing privileges someone used as weapons. First, I suspended Trevor from Mercer Development pending the audit. His building access expense account, purchasing authority, and company email were disabled before 2. I did not fire him in the dark. I preserved records, notified counsel, and placed the decision where evidence could support it. Revenge feels good for an hour. Procedure survives court. Next, Naomi contacted the lender named on the home equity application and delivered notice that every signature was disputed. The lender froze the file and preserved the upload data. Their system showed the documents had been submitted from Trevor's company laptop at 6:43 that morning while I was still attached to a cardiac monitor. My forensic accountant expanded the audit. By dawn, he had traced $612,000 through inflated vendor contracts into Trevor's investment company. Howard's consulting firm had received $78,000. Denise had been paid as an administrative advisor despite never entering our office. The numbers were clean, deliberate, and impossible to explain away. At 6, I called the bank and removed Trevor as an authorized user from the emergency account I had opened for Leela after her wedding. He had used the linked card for client dinners and fuel. I did not touch Lila's access. She had not betrayed me. She had been deceived, and I refused to punish the person he had selected as camouflage. That distinction mattered. My original anger wanted to close every door. The evidence told me which door deserved closing. A father can destroy a wounded child by confusing manipulation with consent. Lila had ignored warning signs, yes. She had defended Trevor too often, yes. But she had not forged my name or searched her mother's letters. At 7:30, a second locksmith arrived. He replaced every exterior lock and gave me 3 keys. One for me, one for Lila, one sealed in Naomi's office. I watched the old cylinders fall into a metal tray and thought about Trevor outside somewhere, discovering that access ends quietly. The click of each new lock sounded almost ceremonial. He came back at 9. I saw him from the upstairs window, though I was supposed to avoid stairs. He wore yesterday's shirt and carried no suitcase. He tried his key once, then again. He pressed the doorbell. When no one answered, he called Lila 12 times. He looked smaller without permission, waiting behind the door. Finally, he walked across the street and borrowed Mrs. Alvarez's phone. Mine rang. I answered because silence had already done its work. Trevor did not speak at first. Without the table, the suit, and his parents beside him, his breathing sounded younger than 35. Across the glass, he scanned the windows for movement. "Grant," he said. "Please. I need to talk to my wife." I looked through the glass at him standing on the sidewalk of the house he had tried to mortgage. "You needed to talk to your wife before you forged her name," I said. "You needed to talk to me before you locked my bedroom." He said Howard had pressured him. He said the investment could still recover. He said nobody was supposed to lose anything. That sentence told me he still measured harm only in money. "You opened letters from a dead woman to her husband," I said. "You made my daughter doubt her own father. You tried to turn my hospital bed into a closing table." He began crying then. Maybe it was real. Tears can be real and still arrive too late. "I can fix it," he said. "No," I answered. "You can face it. Fixing is what people offer before discovery. Facing is what remains afterward." Regret had finally reached him, but responsibility had not. He asked how long he would be locked out. I looked at the red mark the hospital bracelet had left on my wrist. "The house is not the lesson," I said. "The lesson is that love never made this house yours to take. When you understand that the lock will no longer be the part that hurts most." I ended the call. Lila stood behind me in the hallway. She had heard everything. For a moment, I expected her to ask whether I had been too hard. Instead, she leaned her head against my shoulder the way she had when she was 12, and Evelyn's mother died. Her eyes were swollen but steady. "I should have seen it," she said. "You saw what he allowed you to see," I told her. "Now you see the rest. What you do next is yours." I would not order my daughter to divorce him. Trevor had spent years making choices for other people and calling it protection. I would not become him while trying to defeat him. Lila filed for legal separation 3 days later. The fraud investigation moved more slowly, as real investigations do. Digital records were collected. Vendors were interviewed. Howard hired an attorney who suddenly stopped calling the home equity plan a misunderstanding. Denise claimed she had signed as a witness without reading anything. 6 weeks later, Trevor was charged with identity fraud, attempted financial exploitation, and offenses connected to the company transfers. Howard faced conspiracy and tax questions. I did not attend the first hearing. I was at cardiac rehabilitation learning how to walk on a treadmill without arguing with the nurse. The court ordered him to surrender his passport. Mercer Development recovered part of the missing money through frozen accounts and insurance. The rest may take years. I removed Trevor permanently after the audit and promoted the controller who first flagged the invoices. Integrity should open doors too, not only blood relationships. The promotion sent a message through every floor of the company. The bedroom took longer to repair than the lock. Lila sanded the scratches from Evelyn's cedar chest herself. Samuel replaced the closet panel. I framed the damaged hospice letter behind glass, muddy fingerprint and all. Not because I wanted to preserve Trevor's violation, but because Evelyn's words survived it. We worked slowly, refusing to rush the room back into usefulness. 3 months later, Lila moved into a small apartment 10 minutes away. She said she needed a home that belonged to no memory except the ones she chose to build there. I understood. I helped carry boxes but did not pay the deposit until she asked. Love can support without taking over. I was learning that too. On the morning she left, she handed me the spare key to my house. I closed her fingers around it. "This is still your home," I said. "Not your property. Not your inheritance today. Your home. There is a difference." She cried, then laughed because crying made me nervous and she knew it. The new lock on my bedroom door is simple brass. No keypad. No code. Every night before I sleep, I pass Evelyn's portrait and touch the frame once. The house is quiet again, but not the violated quiet I heard when I returned from the hospital. This quiet belongs to me. The last time Trevor wrote from county detention, he said he finally understood why I would not open the door. I believe he understands part of it. The rest may take years. A locked door was never my revenge. My revenge was making him stand outside every life he tried to enter through fraud. And my victory was not watching him lose access. It was watching Lila recover her judgment, watching my company survive, and waking each morning in the bedroom he believed he could claim while I was weak. He forgot I owned the house. More importantly, he forgot I was still alive inside it. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Family is not ownership. Help is not authority. And love, real love, never needs a stolen password, a forged signature, or a lock on someone else's door. Sometimes the strongest boundary is the one finally enforced.